here is our favourite conveyancer, because when all you do is conveyancing, you
get very good at it.
Very, very good at it. Paul Denny, how are you, mate?
I'm fantastic.
Good to see you. Now, I was just mentioning, just an overall thought on all of this. I mean, self-managed super funds getting into property. $622 billion in those funds, I noticed today, and those funds are starting to twig that it's not a bad investment. Yeah.
Yep, absolutely. Well, the rules, the investment,
there are rules.
The investment decision would be the same, whether it's a good buy or not. Anyway,
would it? Yeah.
I guess the only thing I could say from a conveyancing point of view, it's a fairly complicated financing arrangement.
So I hear.
You can run up several $1,000s in legal fees to, depending who you borrow the money from, to actually document it and get it settled.
So you'd have to be pretty sure that this was going to be a good investment for you, wouldn't you?
Well, that would be the starting point in any case, yes.
Yeah. But several $1,000s in legal fees.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, okay. So it's all very well to read that and you think, oh, that sounds like a good idea.
Yes.
But the super funds themselves, $622 billion in a super fund.
Yeah, look, if they're just buying the property out of the funds, that's fine, but it's when they need to borrow the money and you get into this thing called bear trusts and all sorts of complex arrangements. So,
yeah, and you're going to need advice for that, and that could cost you a lot of money.
Absolutely.
Okay. All right, now, if you've got any questions for Paul, give us a call, of course. The number is 13 12 83. Now, foreign resident capital gains without withholding payments regime. Now, I mentioned, when we spoke about this last week, I had 2 or 3 mates, one of them up in the dog park, said, God, I didn't know that. It comes into effect. It came into effect 1 July.
1 July, yeah. It's a pretty clumsy name. I think
foreign resident capital gains withholding payment.
Well, we're going to come up with an anagram for it, but I'm sure it'll start with an F for foreign, of course.
Yeah.
But look, we've been living with that for several months now, so we're starting to learn a little bit more about it.
Yeah.
But look, let's just go back a step and see what it's all about.
Yeah.
So this is the ATO.
Yep.
Last week we were talking about the state government.
Yep.
So this is a federal government initiative, and where it stems from is this. They suddenly realised that a lot of foreign owners were selling properties, making big capital gains, and not paying capital gains tax.
Yeah.
Because the money was disappearing out of the country before they could catch up with them, and of course they can't catch up with them.
Yeah.
So when they had this realisation, they've now come up with this brilliant idea that everyone selling a property over $2 million must have 10% retained by the purchaser, and that purchaser sends 10% of the purchase price to the ATO. Directly to the ATO. That's the starting point. Okay. So if you're selling a property for, say, $2.2 million, the purchaser has to hold back $220,000 of your money and send that to the ATO.
Wow.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, when you're trying to, I suppose that's the theory behind it, trying to limit overseas investment? Is that what they're trying to do?
No, look, they're just trying to collect the capital gains tax that should have been paid
anyway
on the sale.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, that sounds scary.
It does.
But, and as I said, that's the starting point.
Yeah.
But where you go from there is that everyone can apply for an exemption.
Right.
Okay. Now, someone like yourself and myself, we're Australian residents. The property we're selling may be our own home, so there's no capital gains tax. We will get an exemption very quickly, in 1 or 2 days.
Okay.
So 95% of the people won't have that money retained.
And won't have the problem.
It's the other 5% where their affairs, either their taxation affairs or their ownership affairs, are a little bit complex. They may not necessarily get the exemption.
Yep.
They have to make then an application for a variation, which can take some time, and they may still have that 10% retained.
Okay, this is the question I got from the fellow who spoke to me in the dog park. So if your partner is not a resident, is that when you have the problem?
Well, the interesting thing about this particular concept is that every owner has to apply. So there's an application from one person and there's an application from that person's partner, and if one person doesn't qualify, the full 10% does get retained.
Okay, so if it's on it, and it's only properties over $2 million
at the moment. Well, I say that because I have had feedback that it's been so successful that if you think about it, for every property selling above $2 million, there must be 10 others below that figure that would equally be as liable for the payment of capital gains tax. So nothing would surprise me that they'd suddenly drop the threshold down to, say, $1 million.
Tell me why, and if you've got any questions for Paul, 13 12 83, tell me why that capital gains tax can't be collected. I mean, when you say it just disappears overseas, is there no way of tracing that at all?
No, but the people don't live here.
Yeah, right.
Okay, so they've sold the property, they've got the money, it's gone off overseas, and no one can find them. That's happening a lot.
Yeah.
This all came to light when the ATO did a reconciliation with the approvals given by the Foreign Investment Review Board, and they found out that they never really heard when the property actually got sold. Okay, so there might have been a capital gain there.
Yeah.
Well, we haven't seen it.
No, and Scott Morrison has cracked down a bit on some of these foreign investment laws, hasn't he? And forced people to sell the property, but only a dozen or so. They've got to be more than that.
They're the people who have bought without getting the approval.
Yeah, right.
But with all this, Tim, there's a huge sting in the tail.
Which is?
This. If a purchaser who should be holding back the 10% doesn't do so, they still have to pay.
Oh.
So just think about that for a minute.
Yeah.
You bought a property for $2.2 million. Not hard in Sydney.
No, it's not hard.
You settle and you move in. 3 months later, you get a letter from the ATO. Dear Mr. Smith, we noticed you bought this property 3 months ago. We were expecting you to send us $220,000, which we haven't seen.
And you didn't.
So would you please send it to us now?
Whoa.
Plus interest.
Right.
How would you like to receive that letter?
No, you would not.
Yes.
Yeah, you would not.
So
back a step. To get that clearance certificate, you would do that before this wholesale process takes place?
Around about this, it has to be done before settlement of the sale.
Okay.
Typically, we would apply immediately. If we know the property is going to be over $2 million, we would apply early. So it's sorted out before there's an actual exchange of contracts. But even if it's not, there's plenty of time, if it's clean, to get it done within 1 or 2 days.
No wonder people need you.
Yes.
Well, here's the thing. I mean, in your experience in these only few months, how many people have not been aware of that?
Oh, plenty.
Yeah.
Plenty. So the question was put to me the other day, well, with that example of the purchaser that doesn't know about it, the question is, well, how can that happen? Because that's our job, is to make sure it doesn't. So, but then you think about a situation, for instance, where maybe someone acts for themselves.
Yes.
And they don't know about it.
Yep.
Or someone who occasionally would get a solicitor to act for them who doesn't do a lot of conveyancing. They do a lot of family law. Well, they may not be aware of it.
Yeah, right.
So it's going to be very easy for it to slip through.
Okay.
And the first time that purchaser will know about it is when they get the bill from the ATO.
Okay. So if you don't retain that 10%, and you think, it's all hunky-dory, you'll still get that. Well, not.
You still got to pay.
You get a nasty letter.
This is the purchaser.
Yeah.
Still got to pay. I mean,
yeah. Well,
I don't know what you describe it, but something's going to hit the fan.
Yeah, it sure is.
Big time.
And in your experience, when that seems to be so successful, would they think about then making it properties over $1.5 million or $1.75 million?
That has been suggested.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think at the moment we're all settling into the actual process and living with it. That's going reasonably well. There's been a few little hiccups, but nothing major.
Yeah.
But I think once they see the success of it, I say, well, yippee, let's go for the people below $2 million.
Yeah, look, I'm not complaining about that, because if people are avoiding their capital gains tax, well,
yes.
The ATO has the right to recoup that.
Yes.
But it's when then it becomes a retrospective thing, doesn't it? So they go, $2 million's good, so let's make it $1.5 million. Let's make it even $1 million.
Yeah, well, I would applaud that.
Would you?
Look, it's a huge increase in the paperwork once again.
Yeah.
I showed you last week the 8-page application for stamp duty.
Yeah.
This is an 8-page application to get your exemption on this as well. If you're selling a property.
Wow.
So
what could possibly be in the 8 pages?
There's questions about, where have you been living for the last 2 years?
Yeah.
Have you lodged a tax return? Where do you intend to live next year?
Oh, my goodness.
What have you been using the property for? Do you live there? There's all sorts of, it's everything.
God, mate, that's a mini census certificate, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah.
There's nothing that the ATO won't know.
No. Well, that's what we discovered in the census, and people whinging about their privacy. There's nothing they don't know anyway, is there?
Not now.
Really?
Yeah.
I mean, if you've got a driver's license and you've got credit cards and you've got a passport, they know everything anyway.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes.
All right. Well, that's, as I say, that's why we need you. Any other news on the conveyancing front that we should know about?
Look, putting all that together, I think that the thing that I've noticed about this year in particular is that I've been in Sydney since 1993. Prior to that, I was practicing in South Australia for 15 years.
Yeah.
And progressively since 1993, the actual mechanics, the process of conveyancing has become a lot easier with IT.
Of course,
Okay.
yes.
Now, I recall when I first came here in '93, people were used to paying somewhere between $3,000 and $4,000 for their conveyancing to buy a property. Nowadays, 20 odd years later, it's say between $2,000 and $3,000.
Yes, it is.
So it's actually gone down.
Yeah.
And that's all been driven by the fact that the actual way we do our work has become far more efficient. That to this year has gone into reverse. Because with all these papers that people have to sign,
well, it is all more work for you.
Well, it's more work for us. It's more work for them as well, because we can't do them for them.
Yeah.
So we provide the form, and they have to go through, and they get some people struggle with it. So we have to sit down and go through it with them.
Mate, the government's bang on about making things easier for you, but they hardly ever do.
Not this year.
No. Okay. Well, as I say, that's why they need you.
Yes.
All right, mate. Always great to talk to you.
Thanks, Tim.
Paul Denny, of course, from Paul Denny Conveyancing. And look, when all of that's there, you just got to make sure you know what you're doing, because that'd be nice, wouldn't it? Get a nice little letter in the mail from the ATO. You owe me $200,000. Freak out. It is 11 to